SheerLee here with Sirius Talis Moon, and this is Soul Hour, Mars Day. Sun in 0 degree Aquarius, the midheaven is separating from Deneb Algedi, while the moon is applying to Deneb Algedi. And ruled by Saturn, 27 degrees Pisces here in the 10th house, ascendant 14 degrees Gemini, and Mercury 29 degrees Capricorn. So, I would like to address challenges in removing toxic mold. And I will begin with a simple example, which is very literal. How experts remove toxic mold. So if I go by AI, which basically takes a look at the top performing sites that have relevant information to this question, so we can only blame our set of experts if the algorithm is wrong, or a hidden facet that we don't know about. Experts remove black mold. So here they talk about, of course, what is the water source that causes the excess humidity, using respirators, gloves, and goggles to make sure they decrease their chances to get lung cancer and die from toxic mold. Um, hydrogen peroxide, enzymatic cleaners, or even baking soda and vinegar. Um, and here's the thing, because they talk about what type of mold, what type of infestation, in order to find the correct solution. Okay, kind of like if baking soda and vinegar don't work, what do we do next? Um, and this is where they would need to use a lab. Now, what do we know about labs? We need a degree in something to do with chemistry to be in one. What do we know about degrees? Okay, to anything that requires a certification, academic or not, by the way, the more the more access to opportunities that particular certification opens. For example, an engineering or a chemistry degree is immediately open job opportunities. I know people need to forget their degree and focus, particularly with engineering, on hands-on experience, but it does open opportunities, whereas philosophy of science is a different type of thinking strategy. Okay, if I have philosophy of science background, I can tap into the core issue in each science, which is quite relevant when we talk about applied science. Okay, one of the things that I tended to in the body-mind question is basically the fact that, let's say, for people who deal with new types of weapon against them, until the doctors and the psychiatrists and everyone would sort that question out, there would already be people killing themselves, killing others, committing crimes against humanity, um, losing jobs, not participating in healthy power structures, transmuting and toxifying into toxic mold structures, and even extortion and trafficking cults. Shit tons of problems, and we cannot allow, and I think Sabrina here from YouTube that talks about physics, we cannot allow the margin of the 1% until it gets into uh, basically a convention or what is considered conservative science. We talk about what is scientific, or the democratic question of science for people who like the geeky term, then we cannot wait for everything to be 99.99999% exact to prevent death and further implications. Okay, this is the first frontier. And this is what my thesis was tending to, amongst gazillion of other questions. Because when I tend to how do we know that we know regarding the body-mind question, I basically tend to a shit ton of things in the court of the universe, which kind of got me into challenging situations myself where I had to basically apply this knowledge with my very own insights, that is not waiting for something to be dogmatically accepted science, because I would basically not live to tell. It could be that I would live to tell, but it would only be if I would go through that 1% loophole, and many of the things, many of the relevant information, practices, um, underlying philosophies, epistemology and ontologic, which means what am I looking at and how do I know that I know, would probably be considered from not really certain to completely far-fetched scientifically, and yet that was a part of the things that I needed to try to stay alive. Okay, um, that basically how actual applied science works. So if you hear that and you see, well, that person is doing astrology, kind of weird. But now that you heard the background story, I can't promise doing astrology will work for each and every individual, but that's definitely something that I look at every time I open any important decision or any major event. I open a chart. Other people have other methods, and that's definitely not something that crosses the threshold of the 1% of what we call exact science and conventional or conservative science, which means not the innovative science, not where we speculate, where we try out first frontiers and even far-fetched ideas, which usually is only ethical to try in first frontiers. Now, congestions. To have a degree that's applicable to be working at the lab, one would need to be trusted. Why? Because the same tests that can be done for mold, the same chemistry, could be used for a gazillion of other things. Okay? If we talk about hydrogen and oxygen, add a C, we have three letters, HCO. Change the number, and we have completely different chemical components. O2, CO2, H2O. Wait a second. What about the other O? Oh, eroding your arteries. Okay? That's chemistry. That's why chemistry is governed by Virgo, which is the meticulous sign of Mercury, where every single detail can completely change what material we're even dealing with. On the other hand, the same generic component can be marketed under a gazillion different names with zero scientific progress, although it would be marketed consecutively, and I speak from experience, running into that as a researcher, as groundbreaking treatment for don't take olanzapine. And I say that based on gazillion class lawsuits that were winning and shit ton of lost lives. Which, on the scale, qualifies for me to say that even though I'm not a doctor. Why? I'm just sharing information. If you Google, these are the class lawsuits won about olanzapine harming, killing, and molesting people. And just sharing that information, yeah, there would have to be a really good reason, which there isn't. It interferes with absorption of minerals. You say, oh, what about chemo? Well, what about alternatives for chemo? What about removing the chemtrails from your naturally growing crops that prevent abnormal cell growth, amongst which cancer is one study case? Why prevents? Because when there are no toxins, we have less susceptibility for, or contributes to prevent, okay? We have less susceptibility for abnormal cell growth. Why? Because what do toxins do? They interfere with the body chemistry. And chemistry is the thing where one component, O and O2, are two different components. O2, quite important for life. That would be oxygen. O is the reason we deteriorate because it's oxidation. Same O, 1 and 2. And that type of information can heal a patient or kill a patient. We understand how in biomedical warfare that's useful. If somebody wanted to assassinate Ali Khamenei, if they could get him to get a random check by his doctor, and they could get to his doctor, they could put something while they're taking the blood that is slightly chemically different, and that Khamenei would either immediately drop dead or drop dead in such a slow and unfelt way that would take several hours or several days even to make the connection between the blood test and the death of Ali Khamenei. Yes, now here's the thing. Because I'm an astrologer and because there's always connection between the planets, I could be talking about something that could actually happen. So I'm not speaking anything into being, just giving a concrete example about possible assassination method, which tells me that to save the life of a patient or to diagnose, for example, toxic mold that could kill people, one would need to be trusted. What does it mean to be trusted? It means that they have to rape children in face of cameras, usually drugged up, so that they can be extorted to assassinate Ali Khamenei. Now, what if they're extorted to assassinate not Ali Khamenei, but the entire Iranian people? But surely they would necessitate a blood test for each and every citizen. Um, which is why patient sovereignty is so fucking important, and violation of it is crime against humanity. The other juncture after studies is, of course, praxis. To get the certification, there is the certification of studies, and there is the professional certification. You can study 11 years to be a doctor. If you haven't gone through your apprenticeship, which is, by the way, another juncture, and this is why there is ritual abuse within hospitals, basically you would need your certification to be a doctor. You have your certification that you studied, but then you need your license. And the license is another, basically, juncture where one would need to be trusted. Why? Because if we assassinate Ali Khamenei with an unlicensed doctor, we've created excess bureaucratical troubles around something that's supposed to be a simple and efficient action. If a licensed person did that, there's enough C factors to be considered. For example, this is why immediate death would be causing problems. Okay, we would have to hide that death, we would have to wonder why, or somebody, some intelligence agency would have to say, yeah, we did it. Okay, it's effective for when the intelligence wants to say, oh, we permeated Iran, so and so and so, but this would be a method of assassination that would bother civilians thinking, wait a second, that means a foreign intelligence can invade a hospital in a country. If we did it there, why would not they do it here? And now they have incentive to do it here. Who is they? I don't know. Who would be his allies? I don't even have to answer that question for this to be a point of concern. once that mistake was made, there usually would be intelligence attempt to gaslight the public that it doesn't matter and it's this and experts say and so on and so forth, and the chance to do that to a civilian, da 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 da, bullshit. If it can be done to civilian number one, it can be done to everyone. Um, and this is something to be considered about assassination methods. And this is why licensed doctor is also a juncture. The license itself, after the 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years of study and 2, 3 years of apprenticeship, is also a juncture. That's shit ton of babies murdered, children trafficked, organ trade, crime against humanity, drug trafficking, and pretending that the research by the peer-reviewed pharmaceutical companies is accurate and not missing any millions that died of the so-called side effects. So now that we understand that removing toxic mold requires somebody that systematically had to be trusted to be in the lab, and it would be very inefficient to have an untrusted person in the lab. Okay? Something that should bother all of us. And this already tells us that when it comes to methods for removing toxic mold, visibly, if we are going to see that the black mold is being removed, visibly, we'll have to rely on our 5 senses alone and hope that there isn't some invisible. Another type of toxin is gas, of course. In Israel, we had a case where 57 children were in one apartment as kindergarten, and there was toxic gas leak. Because that gas had no scent, 2 babies, I think, died. The rest were harmed, but somehow managed to sustain, which is a miracle. But if we had to lab test a dose of what's in the showers, we would need to have reliable information from people that are trusted not to provide it to the public. So this is one challenge, and to put that challenge in the light is already tending to another form of toxic mold.